Hello and welcome to the Connection Compass podcast. I am your host, Andrea I. To find out more about my work, please visit andreaLevans.com. Today I am talking to Nicky Yazbeck, a licensed clinical social worker and a registered and certified yoga teacher with over 20 years experience. Nicky's story holds so many pieces of what it means to truly heal. We talk about listening to the body, healing from trauma, and the quiet courage it takes to leave the things we've outgrown, our jobs, homes, or visions of ourselves. We explore plant-based healing, intuitive travel, and what happens when you trust the next step, even when you can't see the whole path. Hi, Nicky. Welcome to the Connection Compass podcast. It's great that you could be here. For our listeners, could you just share a little about yourself, please?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for having me. I live in Colorado and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I've been doing that for quite a while. And I've been teaching yoga for over 20 years. And I'm just super happy to be here.
I have been listening to your podcast, The Connected Community.
Hmm.
And it's quite funny because every time I kept hearing the connected community, I honestly thought you were going to say the compass, the connected compass.
Uh,
Oh, they're quite similar. And the past few weeks on the podcast, we have been talking about healing journeys. And what I sense from your podcast and the things that you said, the episode that you did with your husband, and it feels like we have all been on these separate healing journeys, and all of a sudden we're coming together to connect, to talk about this stuff. Would that resonate with you?
yeah, 100%. I feel like there's a big shift in the world right now. And then a lot of people are moving towards healing, they're moving towards connection, and people are wanting that more and valuing that more right now.
Why do you think they're valuing it more?
Gosh, I feel like we're so disconnected in a lot of ways through social media and through, like, just keeping ourselves busy, and so if you just go and you sit anywhere for 5 minutes and you watch people, everyone's just super connected to their phones, people even in restaurants, and so I think because of this disconnection, it's creating a surge in mental health issues and depression and anxiety and all of that. And so people are just trying to find their way. I feel like a lot of people are lost and they're trying to find their way. And there's been this disconnection from other humans, and that's so important. And so people are coming to therapy and they're coming and seeking services because they're wanting and needing that connection to self and that connection to other. And I feel like the way the world is right now, it's created a big disconnect for a lot of people.
Yeah, I feel that as well. That it sounds like something that I would say because I've been seeing it and feeling it for a very long time, and I first saw it in the dating scene actually, and seeing this disconnect from human connection, or there seemed to be a fear of connection, a fear of just being in a space and holding space. It felt more people were running than connecting. And so I suppose thinking of my journey and listening to yours, what does disconnected look like for you? What does it feel like?
What does it feel like when I'm disconnected?
Yeah.
I feel like those moments when I've been disconnected, I just haven't been running busy. So for me, that's my modality. I'm just super busy. I could be just doing a lot of things without awareness. So I could be scrolling on my phone, which I feel like everyone does. I'm super guilty of that. We could just be on the computer all day. We could be consumed with eating or over exercising or like, just over anything, like, overdoing anything so that we don't have time to sit with ourselves and just have a minute to self-reflect, to sit in meditations, to sit in quietness, to sit in stillness, And then when we're with other people, maybe we're distracted, maybe we're thinking about other things, and we're not 100% fully there and present and tapped in and listening to what the person's saying. And so I think that that's a disconnect with self and other.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I always find in those moments of disconnection, and it is very human to fall into those patterns. The healing is lifelong, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is, but for me, it feels very numbing when I'm disconnected. Can't really hear myself particularly well. I don't really feel like being with others, doing the doom scroll, uh, eating the wrong things, which when you're not able to then hear yourself and what you need, you what am I trying to say? You haven't got the right energy, have you, to move forward? There's no energy there, is there, to move towards the things that light you up or give you energy, so you get stuck. And I suppose there's lots of reasons why we would go into those pockets of disconnection. We might feel a little low, or perhaps something's happened to put us into that place. And sometimes you just have to ride it out, don't you?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it feels like wading through mud sometimes when you're in that
Yeah.
space.
And there isn't always a knowing at the time what is causing that. So it is like walking through mud, uh, walking through mud and surrounded by fog. It's not
Mhm.
always you're not always able to see clearly, or know what that feeling is about, that what's causing that, which is why you need to sit in stillness and meditate and listen and hear, because that's where you will get those answers from.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think sometimes it's an avoidance because we're obviously going into those spaces of disconnect because we're avoiding something. We're avoiding being with ourselves because there's something we're not wanting to look at or we're not wanting to deal with or we're not it's too hard or it's too complicated. And so sometimes when we learn to sit with ourselves, things can come up, issues can come up. We might feel like our partners are not right for us or our work isn't right for us or we're not on the right path or we want to change careers or like there's something that's not working or we want like we don't even want to look at the addiction. Maybe we have an addiction to alcohol or food or exercise or whatever it is, and we don't want to look at that addiction. And so it's a great avoidance, and we all do it. We all do it. And so I think that's human nature. It's just to the extent of how numbed out we are and how much we're doing it and like how many things we're numbing out.
Um, do you think it's collectively what we're seeing at the moment? Do you think there's an avoidance of not wanting to look, not only internally, but externally as well? It's a complete avoidance of both inner and outer worlds.
I'm just noticing that there's two things happening right now, and this is just my perception and interpretation and it could differ for everybody, but what I'm noticing is there's two things happening. Either people are just completely numbing out and they're going further down that path, or people are at lightning speed kind of starting to find who they are and find who they like find themselves and move in this direction of light and positivity and connection. And so I feel like there's that person that's moving down the path of darkness and
Mm.
heaviness, and they're just kind of falling into that without any awareness. And then other people are really working hard to shift out of that. And I think both are happening pretty quickly.
When we come to a point of healing, it always starts with a dark point, doesn't it? There's usually something that pushes us into that place. Things get really uncomfortable, and we can't seem to find the answers in your normal routes, and we feel drawn to experiencing something more. What I've been trying to do in the last couple of sessions is trying to get people to recognize, or support people to understand what it might look and feel like. So
Mhm.
how would you describe those darker moments that then push you into healing?
I think people are coming, what I'm seeing is people coming to a breaking point where this issue from the past keeps coming up, and they were able to push it down, and they were able to push it down, and they were able to push it down, and now they're no longer able to push it down. And it keeps coming up because it wants to be seen and it wants to be dealt with. So it could be an issue in a marriage where they're slowly drifting and disconnecting, and then that starts speaking louder and louder to where it's creating dysfunction, and they need to look at it, or in their job or their career choice, or maybe there was some trauma in their childhood. There was physical abuse or sexual abuse or something that happened, and they talked about it, but they didn't really process it fully to or coming to the present because it needs and wants to be seen. And it's almost like this knocking on the door, and it keeps getting louder and it won't shut up.
Is that something that you recognize in your own life? At the
I think for me, what happened was that I like at some point I fell asleep in my life. I call it falling asleep, where I just was doing the thing. I was going from day to day and everything was just normal. I was probably numbing out a lot of things. And I think this probably happened when I became a mom because you just lose your sense of self for a little while and everything's about other. And so I was just really busy and I was running around. And then at some point I just fell asleep. And then there was a moment where, and for mine, it was a plant medicine journey. I did a plant medicine journey, and then I realized that I had been sleeping and didn't even know it and didn't know how long I'd been sleeping. And then through that, there was some trauma that I thought had been dealt with for sure. I had talked about it and I had processed it and I thought it was done and over with, and it was very old trauma. And it kept coming up over and over again, and so I had to deal with it and move through it, and then when I thought I was done, it came up again, and when I thought I was done, it came up again, and it just kept, like, peeling back the layers of an onion, and it just kept presenting itself until I could clear it out, and that's how all the things started coming up because I'd been sleeping for so long, and so things would come up, and I think that the biggest gift is when we get triggered by somebody or something. So we know when we have an irrational response to somebody when they say something and we blow up, or we're in a car. We've all experienced this. We're in a car and somebody cuts us off and we just go into rage. And it wasn't a big deal. And those are triggers when we have an unusual explosive reaction to something small, or somebody says something and it really hurts our feelings and we can't let it go. Those are triggers, and those are those gems and those gifts because there is something in that for us to learn. There's a nugget, there's there's something to be learned from those experiences.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it resonates, and obviously, when we have something heal, it does take a while, doesn't it, for it to pass through. So sometimes it can come round and around again before eventually it clears. But those triggers, those things where there is that big reaction, I always find them as there being a sign to turn inwards, not to continue going
Yeah.
outwards with that rage, to actually look inwards instead and go into that self-inquiry way. So, can you tell us a little bit about your plant healing journey? Day.
It was a while ago. It was ayahuasca. I found ayahuasca in a group here. I was curious about it because it is such a powerful healing medicine, and I went in not quite knowing what to expect, and what happened was it revealed. I almost look at it, if you're gonna do certain plant medicines, it's you need to be willing to walk through the shadows into your deepest, darkest, hardest moments, and there needs to be an ability for you to sit with yourself and to self-regulate. So if things get really hard, you need to have the ability to bring yourself back down, calm yourself, regulate your nervous system. And so I just got flooded with these memories of this childhood sexual trauma that I had when I was 9 or 10 that I had talked about and shelved and forgotten about. And obviously our body remembers trauma and it sits in our body. And so we can talk about it, but there needs to be some kind of release of that energy out of our body. So talking is one thing. And as a therapist myself, like there is value to that, but there's also value to releasing and purging that out of the body. And so for me, it looked like I had all this rage. And one of the facilitators I I w I was in a group setting, so I didn't feel like it was appropriate to let my rage out in this group setting, and she said to me, "Let's go outside and bring a pillow, and we can scream in the pillow." And I felt that was so ridiculous, and I didn't wanna do it, and I started screaming, there's, like, little tiny screams came out, and she kept telling me to scream, and then I screamed, and this rage unleashed from my body, rage and tears and anger and fist pounding and strangling the pillow and all kinds of stuff, and all these emotions towards that person that hurt me, and really processing those feelings from a place of we're not talking about them, but we're processing them, actively releasing rage, actively releasing resentment and fear and abandonment stuff. And so that was the beginning of that journey. And that night that I went to that ceremony felt like 40 years of therapy.
Oh,
It
wow.
was so powerful and it was so healing, and I felt that there was this unburdening of this giant thing that had been sitting inside of me, and I didn't even know it was sitting inside of me, but our body holds trauma, and our body has to release it, and I think it needs to be above and beyond talk therapy.
Following the ceremony and the releasing of the rage and that anger that your body was holding, was there then a significant shift outside of you?
It was a
Yeah.
process, and
Mhm.
it didn't happen right away, and I had to process it further a few more times. So it was like that onion. I did feel a lot lighter. I did feel it was also harder because I'd been sleeping for so long. And then I opened this wound
Mm.
up and I had to deal with the wound and processing it. And so it took time to process all of the emotions. There were so many emotions around that experience. And so it took time to release it and unburden the rest of it from my body, but it did feel a lot better, and there was this waking up and reclaiming myself and my connection with myself and my body. A Yeah, it's just it was like a full reclamation.
Yeah. Do you feel like you've shed layers over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel like I've released that
Mm.
trauma out of my body, and sometimes that trauma came out like in shaking where I would just shake, and it was my body was shaking out and releasing trauma out of my body. And so it was definitely a process, and there was also layers to it. So there was this layer of being really angry at the masculine and the
Mhm.
oppression of the feminine to the masculine, right? And so it was how I had been oppressed by the masculine and how I had allowed boundaries to be crossed in different ways by different people throughout the years. And then it was oppression of the masculine to the feminine in general in society. And so it was this very expansive, big process. And I love men and I love my husband, and there was never resentment with that. It was different. It was about all of the shadow pieces of how women are oppressed in society, in relationships, in sexually, how
Yeah.
women are forced or coerced or felt guilty or pushed or boundaries are pushed or, there was a time I got a massage and a man crossed the line, just things like that, or I was walking down the street in India and this guy grabbed my boob, like all of these things where they're cumulatively adding up where it was a violation of my body.
Mhm.
And so reclaiming my body as my own and releasing that anger. And so that anger had so many layers to it.
We need to feel safe in these spaces, don't we, around when we're doing the healing work. And w- what advice would you give to somebody else about entering a healing journey, but being safe in that space? And I suppose it's the recognition of when we are able to sort out something ourselves, when we feel the need to talk to others, or when we feel the need to access a professional, but also the feeling of safety within these healing elements. Who-
Mhm,
because
mhm.
it's not for traditional medicine.
Yeah,
We're seeking out different ways to find answers to help and support us, which is fine. But it's a bit about being safe in that as well, isn't it?
mhm. Yeah, I think it's important to interview a bunch of people. So every therapist will, give a 20, 30-minute free consultation, or they should. And you can't teach what you don't know. So you want to go to a therapist who can relate to your experience or who specializes in it. So then maybe they specialize in trauma, or maybe they specialize like whatever it is that their specialty is, really looking at that, seeing if that modality resonates with you, speaking to 3 or 4 therapists and figuring out which one feels good to you, and you'll like which one feels good to your nervous system. When you
Yeah.
talk to them, does it calm you down? And and then, it's a process it's of gaining trust of that therapist and feeling comfortable, and miracles don't happen overnight. And when you think you've healed something, you probably haven't, because there's layers, right? You might have to keep revisiting it over and over and over again. But I think, and I'm a big fan of finding someone that's like a licensed therapist versus a coach, because they have insurance, they've got extensive training, and there is accountability through a board, and ethics. There's a lot of ethics around that. And so, not to say that I think there's some amazing coaches that do amazing work, but I would suggest maybe finding somebody that's licensed in a specialty that speaks to you. And a lot of times, if you go to 5 different bios and you read their bios, they're gonna speak to you.
Oh, that's really good. Something will really resonate, won't it, in the
Yeah.
bio. You have set up communities, haven't you, to support others. So can you tell us a little bit about your community?
So in our ayahuasca community, the only requirement is that somebody does it once. And so there was we live in a huge city. And so there was a group, and it was just really far for a lot of people. And so me, along with the leader of the community, started a women's circle. And the only requirement is that somebody have sat in this ayahuasca ceremony at least once. So it doesn't matter if they did it 3 years ago, or they've done it once, or they've done it 10 times. And there's no requirement to how often they come, so they can drop in whenever they want. But there is this expectation that when you come, you just drop your mask and your facade, and you just show up. So if you're having a bad day, come and be in that bad day. If you're having a great day, be in that day. Like, you don't have to come in a good mood when you're in a good space, because you don't want to burden other people. And so it's really about coming, releasing all of that you hold to the public, and allowing yourself to just be free to express. And it's just really a place of love and acceptance. And so a lot of people say when they've gone through some kind of journey like that, they don't have people to relate to talk to about it, because it's a pretty crazy experience. And if you haven't gone through it, it's hard to understand it. And so here's a community of people that have gone through it, that understand it, that can connect with it. And then also, they're there it's just a place of complete acceptance. And so they feel that sometimes that's the only place that they can go to talk about it. And it's not even about talking about plant medicine. It's just, how are things going with you? What's going on? And then being really clear, if you're wanting the group to give you feedback, if you want them to just hold space, if you want some kind of support, be sure to ask for it. And we're not about saving people. So if you're having your share, and you're really tearful and you're having a hard time, we're not gonna run over and save you because we want you to feel that and experience that and express that, but we might ask, "How can we support you?" And sometimes somebody's like, "I want a hug," and 10 of us women surround them with a big hug, or maybe they want some advice, or maybe they just wanted everyone to listen and just be there for them, and so it's a beautiful community, and this one's been going for about almost 2 years now. So, yeah, I love it.
But when you look over your lifetime and the things that you've experienced and the healing that you've done yourself, how has that led to this place and being in as a place where you're able to hold space for others?
I guess for me, this group is I feel like there's a part of me that's holding space, but I also feel like there's a part of me where it's everybody's group and everyone has ownership to it. So I help like open and close the group and kind of coordinate it, and I talk to people before they join about expectations and things like that. But then once we're there in the group, I'm just as much a member as everyone else, and so I'll do a share. So it's not like I'm holding it and everyone's sharing and I'm not being authentic myself. And I want it to be owned by everybody so that sometimes we'll offer people to open it or people to close it, or somebody has an idea, we'll go with that idea. And so I feel like it's all of our groups and it's not just mine.
What does life look like when you are not working with your intuition? And what does it look like when you're working with,
Yeah.
because you're,
Um
because you are highly intuitive, you do work with your intuition throughout your life.
yeah, it took me a while to actually realize that that was one of my gifts, was my intuition. And not long ago did I realize that. And so sometimes I wasn't following it or I wasn't listening to it. And so that was a process just learning about that I had that gift. But for me, and I follow human design, and so I'm a big fan of human design. And so for me, when I'm not following my intuition and following my path, I get frustrated. And
Mm.
so when I get frustrated, it looks like me trying to stick a circle peg into a square hole. And I
Yeah.
just keep running into walls over and over and over again. And I used to try to keep pushing through the walls. And anytime I did that, it would be a disaster. And so, an example, like a silly example of that, would be say my plumbing goes out and I need a plumber and I call the guy and then he doesn't answer and I call him again and he calls me back and we keep missing each other and then we set up something and he cancels, right? Instead of pushing through that, I'm getting super frustrated. That's like the world's telling me that this isn't the right way to go. And now, after one or two, I just like leave that and I go find another plumber. And so it's the same with everything in life. I know that's a silly example, but if it doesn't feel right, I walk away. If I'm getting frustrated, that's my cue that things aren't in alignment and I need to shift directions. It could be if you're applying for a job and it's just going back and forth, or even with my podcast, because you and I are both podcast hosts, if I'm having trouble coordinating and scheduling something with somebody and then they cancel and then whatever, I'm just like, "That's it, we're done."
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Or maybe just step back, just step away from it, and it's if this is meant to be, then it will just happen. That happened
Yeah.
recently to me actually, and I was just like, I tried about twice at it, and then I was like, no, just gonna step back, and then all of a sudden
Mhm.
it just came together without me doing anything.
Yeah.
Good. So sometimes it is just about, I call those moments impasses. I never really said this before when we are talking about it, but that's what healing looks like for me. That's how I know that something needs healing or letting go
Mhm.
because I keep hitting that brick wall. Nothing will move forward. So what I tend to say is this something I should be doing? Is there another way? Is there something I need to learn? Or do I just need
Mhm.
to let this go?
Yeah, it should if it's super hard, Like,
Yeah,
things are hard and we need to accomplish goals, that's different. But if you're trying to do something simple like connect with a friend and they keep standing you up and they don't call you back or whatever, like, if it should be simple and
yeah.
uncomplicated, and if it's complicated and we keep trying to push through that, trying to make it different, it usually backfires.
It feels draining, doesn't it? When something's really hard, you keep at it, but you can see that there's movement forward. Whereas if you're pushing against something that's not meant to happen, it feels
Yes.
really draining. It can really drag you down anyway.
Well, I was just thinking about, like, that's same with people, right? And so sometimes we hang out with these people and then we end up being drained. We come home and we're just drained. And that's a really big sign too, where I can hang out with a friend and I come home and I'm super excited and I have all this energy and I feel good in my body and they light me up. Versus sometimes, you have a conversation with somebody or you get together and you just feel really dragged down and really negative. That's a sign. Those are things to look.
Yeah. And I thought it was really amazing that when you travelled for 2 years, you used your intuition through all that process, didn't you?
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
takes a lot of trust.
Yeah.
Is that trust in yourself, Nikki, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So I when I was 32, I sold everything and got a backpack and bought a one-way ticket to Thailand and traveled the world for 2 years by myself, and everything was guided by intuition. Where I'd walk down a street and I felt this street isn't safe, or I would meet someone and want to travel with them for a little while, and then I'd think, well, I want to stay in this place, so I'm going to stay here for a while, and you can go on your way. And that entire experience was guided by intuition. And what's cool about that is it was a unique opportunity where I didn't have conditioning from other people. So other people weren't telling me what time to get up and when to do what and I need to go here. It was just me. And so even if anybody can do that and go on any short trip on their own, it doesn't even have to be overseas, and just be with themselves and wake up when you want and eat when you want and just kind of follow like, oh, I want to hop over here and go on a drive here and I want to go to this restaurant and just see how that feels. It feels so good, and when things aren't flowing, then it's time to leave.
I don't know if we've talked about this, but I was 31 and I sold up and left my job and went
Oh,
traveling
awesome.
and went
Oh, that's
traveling.
awesome.
I had my 32nd birthday in New Zealand.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's funny, isn't it? Uh,
That's a great age too, because I really feel like 30 is when women step into who they are fully.
yeah.
It's like there's this magical shift that happens at 30.
It's just after your Saturn return. So,
Mhm.
when you're around your late 20s, there's that maturity, the maturation of the heart chakra. So I think if you're not in your heart, there is a bit of work to do and to find yourself along the way. So what made you sell up and go? What was the driving factor?
Well, so I was married, and that was definitely sticking the circle into the square, like, it just wasn't working. I was also at that time, I was practicing social work, and I'd completely burned out on the field of social work, and in the field that I was providing a lot of services for people that maybe necessarily weren't wanting my services.
Mm.
So, like, working with kids in the foster care and the group home system, or working with dialysis patients on the Native American Indian reservation, and there was just all these jobs where I was being of service, but it was super draining. And so at that point, I decided that I didn't wanna do social work anymore, like, I really wanted to change careers. I let my license lapse and everything at that point, and and then I was in this marriage, and I had moved out, and then was really clear that I just wasn't meant to be with him,
Mm.
and so it felt like this really beautiful opportunity. So everyone was saying, "Oh, I hope you find yourself." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no. This is like I am finding myself." Because I thought, Why wait until you're old right? And you don't have the energy. And I was young and I had the energy. And so I could sleep on trains and I could be in uncomfortable sleeping situations and I could eat street food. And I was strong enough to do that. And so, yeah, I sold everything and bought this one-way ticket, and I was terrified, and I remember telling my family, like, "If I'm I can be back in a month, and that's fine, and I'll give myself permission, and if I'm terrified and it's awful, then I'll come back," and that turned into 2 years.
Wow, and that was in Thailand, so 2 years in Thailand.
I was in India for a long time. I was in India for 10.5 months, and I was, like, Thailand, Burma, Vietnam, Malaysia, Singapore, Cambodia. I went to a ton of places, and I was on a shoestring budget. I was sleeping in pretty so I slept in really crappy places and I ate street food, but I did every adventure that I wanted to do. So I
Yeah.
was trekking on a camel through India, and I was just doing all kinds of crazy experiences, and I got really immersed in the local communities, and so I was doing volunteer work too, so I worked in a Buddhist monastery and I worked in a Muslim school and I homestayed with a Muslim family across from the temple and I just did all these crazy experiences. So I was going to funerals and weddings and teaching little Buddhist monks in Thailand English where they could nobody could hardly speak English in the school and it was magic. I studied yoga in India and I just really I just really immersed myself in the local culture as much as I could.
I was really surprised when I was traveling myself, how many people were around 30, that 30 to 35 mark, who had gone to school, gone to college, gone to university, who, then got their first job and bought the house and then got married or didn't get married, and then they'd got that 29, 30 stage, and they were just like, "Need a break. I feel burnt out." Or I suppose if we were working from our intuition or if we were taught about working with our intuition, that's less likely to happen, isn't it?
What do you mean?
It that when we're connected to our intuition, that we make better choices for ourselves.
Yeah.
Often our intuition can take us out of the norm.
Mhm. Yeah, it, like, turns on our internal compass, and it
Yeah.
turns off the external
Yeah,
compass, or, like, the
yeah.
conditioning that other people put on us about what we should and shouldn't do.
You just step onto this conveyor belt and then, you get to that stage in life, that 28, 29, 30, and realize that this isn't for you. You need something more. There's something internally that you're craving, that you need more. What did that 2 years teach you?
Oh, it was magic. I think it did teach me to trust my intuition and follow my own guidance, and I learned so much about other cultures, and most of the countries I went to were third world countries, and just how incredibly fortunate we are and how grateful I am for the ability to do that and to see these different places and have these experiences, and I 100% came back a different person. I was very connected to myself. I was very confident and there was in that 2 years, you go through some hard things. You go through ups and downs, and I had some bad experiences. I had my things stolen. There was just all kinds of things that happened, and I got through them, and I
Yeah.
stayed there, and I was alone, and all I had was me, and even back then, I'd call my family once a week, and I could only talk for a while because it was so expensive to make those phone calls, and internet, like, wasn't like it is now. I didn't have a smartphone, that didn't exist, and I would go in once a week, and I would write a long email to my email list and my family, and it was almost like a massive journal entry, and so it was really cathartic for me to do that, and it was a way to stay connected to people, and then people would write back to me, and so once a week I would do that, but I can't tell you how many times I would write an email and I'd be in that cafe for an hour and the internet would crash and the email would disappear. It's not like, I had an emergency phone and it was insanely expensive to call. I feel like it was like several dollars a minute just to call, and I was on some kinda, like, cheap plan that I found,
What year
and
was that then? What years were that then?
so that was 30 years ago. Yeah, I'm 52 now. Yeah, so back in the dark ages.
Not the dark
Yeah,
ages. I was
yeah,
2007 when I was traveling. So,
yeah.
yeah, so
Okay.
I sold the house in 2006, and then I started traveling in the following January, um,
Mhm.
till the September. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
they
it's incredible. I mean, if if anybody ever has the ability to do something like that, it was the best thing I've ever done in my entire life.
I think it's the best education that you would traveling is one of the best educations you will ever have, and it's not just about going to see places and learning about the culture, but it's like you say, it's about the self-awareness and the self-development of just taking on and getting through, and,
I mean, there were some really hard moments. There was some crazy things that happened. There was some really big disappointments, and then, I got really sick in India once and I had to go to the,
Mhm.
like, emergency. And, there's nobody there to take care of me. There was nobody checking on me, and yeah, it's beautiful knowing that you can get through those experiences and that you're fine and you have this inner strength and the inner wisdom to get through it.
Yeah. So what's your plans going forward? How do you think your community will develop, or what other things have you got in the pipeline that you could share with us?
I would love to have a retreat center one day and be able to offer therapeutic services and plant medicine, and I mean, a lot of these plant medicines are moving towards being legal, and a lot of them are legal and already in Colorado, and my husband is going back to school again for the 3rd time,
Mm.
so him and I could work together in that arena, and I just really wanna be of service and help people see their light and help people tap into this part of themselves. It's a difficult journey, and so I'm really motivated to work with people that are really motivated to get there and to cross that bridge and get to the other side. And so hopefully one day we'll have a retreat center that people can visit.
Oh, I'd love to come.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Nikki, it's been lovely speaking to you. Thank you for coming on the podcast and your sharing your journey.
Thank you so much for having me. It was super fun to chat with you.
I really enjoyed my conversation with Nikki. We had spoken before recording our podcast together, and it was only during the podcast recording that, like me, Nikki had sold her home, left her job, and travelled. That's what I love the most about these conversations. When we talk with others, we find connection. Our experiences, thoughts, and feelings are not in isolation. We find similarity and connection beyond the surface of what we see. To find out more about Nikki's work, the details are in the show notes, so if you'd like to connect with her or learn more about her work, the detail is there. And thank you once again for listening to this week's episode of The Connection Compass. If you think it will help someone else, please leave a review and share. If you have any questions, please visit Andrea L. Evans' Facebook page, and remember to keep talking, keep connecting for a more interconnected world.